Hi, my name is Bruce Bolger, and I'm founder of the Enterprise Engagement Alliance, an organization dedicated to the strategic and systematic management of people across the enterprise. I'm very pleased to be here today with colleagues in the area of human capital and stakeholder capital management. Dr. Heiko Morterer, he is a founder and a board member of 4C Group, a leading human capital management company. He's joined today with Stefan Grunwald, a senior partner at 4C Group. And we're glad to have Zahid Mubarak. He's CEO of HR Metrics, one of the leading human capital management companies in the world and in his part of the world, MENA. And also he is a worldwide trainer and certifier of experts in human capital management. So gentlemen, thank you today. And essentially, our agenda is to talk about the new European Union Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and to, in effect, demystify it so that companies can really understand how to take advantage of this as a business opportunity, and also to kind of demystify a little bit of the acronyms that the Europeans are terrific at, and because we need to understand that the law requires the use of European sustainability recording standards. In other words, it gives you, the company, the option to use formal standards on how to disclose what you do and measure it. So we'll be clarifying what are known as the European Sustainability Reporting Standard reporting requirements, and that's going to be done by mostly by Stefan, with some input, I believe, by Heiko. Then I'll be quickly discussing the sort of the implementation process and timeline. And then Zahid will be taking over to really discuss the history of this whole concept of human capital management, reporting, stakeholder management, and standards, because there are very few people in the world that have more knowledge and experience about this than he does. So I am now going to stop my share, and I'm going to turn this over to Stefan, who's going to really help us understand the whole concept of the new law. He can't obviously cover it all in 20 minutes, but he will give you some examples, delving into a couple of the elements of the law to help you better understand it.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, you're right. I don't have the chance to get all the information by in 20 minutes. My name is Stefan Grunwald, and I'm happy to present some of the insights from the ESRS standards. And I will give you a brief introduction and a general overview, give you some insights on the purpose and the requirements of the ESRS, and then we go a little bit deeper and see the challenges to comply with those standards. These standards are not really new in a way. They have a long history. And the history starts with the UN Global Compact and the UN Sustainability Development Summit, where some goals have been established. And the whole CSRD is based on the NFRD, the Non-Financial Reporting Directive. The difference between those two things is one is the scope. The NFRD was only valid for large capital market-oriented companies, banks, insurance companies, whereas the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, will also be valid for small and medium enterprises, and in the long run also for non-EU companies that have an EU subsidy or a branch. And the second one is that the NFRD was not binding, and now the CSRD is a binding thing, it's law. I'm always asked, what is the difference between the ESRS and the CSRD? Many abbreviations in one sentence. The European Sustainability Reporting Standards shall help people to comply with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So it's more or less a standard helping to clarify, aims at clarifying the requirements that are in the CSRD. And so we have a brief look at what's in these ESRS standards. As I mentioned earlier, the scope is deepening. And if you keep it very short, you see that in the very beginning, it all was focused on capital market, on credit, on money. And now the scope is broadened. And in the end, in 2026, you see small companies, small non-listed companies. And if you have a look at the balance sheet total, the turnover requirements or the employees, if companies in 2026 with more than 10 employees and a balance sheet of 350,000 euro or 700,000 euro turnover have to comply with the CSRD, then you see almost everybody has to be prepared to disclose all these information here. So it's something that is broad for the economy. If you have a look at these different standards, then there was a deep discussion on how many things have to be disclosed and lots of KPIs that are defined. And as you have seen in the journals, that this double materiality has been added in the last discussions of the Commission. And what's important about this is that people have to look at those economic, social, and governmental issues, topics from two perspectives. The one is, what kind of impact does my company has on these impacts outside of the company? And the other perspective is there something that might risk or give a chance to my financial situation, for my financial stability? And these two perspectives, you have to check whether these topics I'm mentioning later are of a materiality that you have to report on these issues. A second thing I'd like to mention here is, as I said, it's binding, it's law, and this means that at some point the auditors will have to have a look at what has been disclosed. So it's mandatory to have an audit. And doing this or having this in mind, everybody knows that an auditor needs good documentation, needs a process that is reliable and documented, so that you do not have just to pull these information together and create a report, but you have to make sure that this information is processed in the same way during all those periods to follow, and that the quality of the data is ensured by this. If you have a look at the coverage of the standards, then those of you who are already applying for instance, the Global Reporting Initiative will find it quite familiar. These the reporting standards is based on 4 pillars. The first one is more of a general disclosure, general requirements, and those who are applying GRI know that in these sections you have to describe your business model, you have to describe the materiality, you have to describe what kind of impact different issues or the dimensions have on your business model. And then the 3 following pillars cover the E, S, and G. And as you can see, the climate change, pollution, water resources, biodiversity, and circular economy are those dimensions that are already covered by the EU taxonomy. This is a different law. This is not covered by the same standard, but it's quite close to it. And in the second one, the social one, it's going from inside to outside. So you're starting with your own workforce and how you treat your own workforce, how own workforce is regarded. And then you broaden this and go to the workers in the value chain, which, for instance, in Germany is covered by a different law as well. Then you have how you affect the communities in the areas and the plants where you're working with. And finally, what is with your customers and the end users of the products. And last but not least, all these governance standards is how you conduct your business, how you regard law, and how you behave in the way good business or good management is perceived. And I put these other standards like GRI or the SASB standards, have a big overlap with those standards, but unfortunately, overlap doesn't mean it's equal. So there are some differences in between. And once you go through these standards, you will see where the differences are. And one takeaway you can have is at the first is the CSRD as a law. So you have to stick to these requirements. And whenever there's something in the GRI that is not compliant with the CSRD, just take the CSRD or the ESRS standard for your internal definitions.
Stefan, may I jump in here just quickly? So just a remark from my side around those standards that are listed here within the social area, the S area of ESG. So this is really the first time that we now have transparency around what the EU is, how the EU is defining what they mean with the S in ESG. And what is very, very specific here is that they expand the understanding of the social aspect also to communities and to stakeholders in the value chain. I think, Bruce, in the US, this can be referred to as, I think the word in the US is stakeholder capitalism. That's probably very good reflected here in the definition of the social reporting responsibilities of the EU.
Well, it is quite surprising that the Europeans have led the world in creating a stakeholder approach because, as Stefan has well articulated, they cover in the social, and really they don't mean social the way we mean it in the United States. Social has all sorts of implications in our country that don't exist in the European. What they really mean there is stakeholder, because there's nothing, Stefan, that I've seen in this law that requires people to make donations to disinterested third parties. So I'll turn it back over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, right. Before we go to the disclosures in depth, there's something in general. And it's not only about transparency and not only about giving some insights in the business by having some KPI or some information, but it's focused on what good management means or what active management means. So for the whole standards, you're asked to describe the governance, the processes and controls you have in place to foster these targets. You have to describe a strategy, how you want to achieve those targets and aims. You have to describe how you manage the impacts and risks and opportunities and what kind of metrics and targets you have defined. So whenever you have a look at those standards, then a transition plan, policies, processes in place, actions, targets, etc., have to be described. This is two flips of one coin. One side is the standard setters seem not to believe in management capabilities and therefore forcing companies to describe each and every step to be done. On the other side, if you would embrace those targets and would do it on your own, you would follow exactly the same path. So you can say, okay, they are trying to have me describing this very detailed and I don't like it. Or you can say, okay, if I like or if I think those targets are not so unreasonable, I can follow these processes, and it's a good way to manage these things through. If we have a look at these standards, and we talked earlier about this, I cannot go through all these standards in depth because this is too much. So what I'm doing first is I pick up these two red highlighted standards, talk about these a little bit more in depth, and then I flip through the others just to give you an impression what's in there. But to talk about all of these standards, each of those standards would require at least 20 minutes, if not more, to understand what's really behind these standards and what they are really focusing at and what kind of metrics and documents are required to meet these standards. So if we start with the disclosure on resource use and circular economy, then you see it's aiming at how the company deals with material, with the inflow and the outflow, and how you're working with the materials in the most reusing, reduced, and recycling way. And if you have a look at the ideas that are behind it, and some of these ideas are mentioned in the standards as well, it's encouraging sustainable consumption. It's encouraging that you have sustainable product patterns, that you use efficiently materials and water and energy, and that you share knowledge, etc. And the actions that they are proposing is that you reduce waste and set up recycling products and conduct assessments to understand the environmental impacts of your products. And if you have all those things together, then my experience from our customers is that if the material is valuable, all those things have already been done. If the material is not as valuable as that it has an impact on the profit and loss statement, then those things just slip through. And here it's really to understand what impact do we have on our or with our production use. And these standards in some ways just connect to other standards. If you, for instance, take the water and the energy part, then you could also have these two standards focusing on climate change and energy, or the standards that's called on water consumption, especially if you are having a plant in an area that is scarce of water. If you then have a look at what is required, or what are the challenges typically to define those policies, these actions, these resource inflows and outflows, then we found that this information is mainly non-financial information that is different in physical units, so that you cannot aggregate them properly. So if someone asks you what is the ratio of reused material, you have to decide whether it's by weight, by volume, by value, by whatever, and this can change with throughout the production process. And in essence, you have to talk to different people and functions within your company to get a clear view on how to define circularity and reusability, recyclability of things you are using within your production process and of your product as such. So you have to talk to the product engineering, interacting with marketing and customers to define the product characteristics. You have to talk to procurement regarding pricing and input characteristics, and the production. I have a customer that started to put in some reusable steel, or a steel with a higher ratio of recycling into the production process, but it did not have the same characteristics. So the production process had to be changed, and in addition, they had to talk to the customers using the materials, because their material had to fit into the production process of the customer as well. So what you see here is that it's easy to state, okay, define the ratio of reusability in the standard. Having this to be accomplished means really work in the process, in the product development, etc. This is one example of what is required, or in which direction the standards are heading, and what they think the people or the companies have to do in their engineering. Second thing, we talked about already about the social, the S1. What you can see here is it's about working conditions, about basic employee rights and inequalities, and the idea is that you're treating your people well. But if you're again having a look at those different directions, if you have a multi-national company, then things become not easy, because what work-life balance means in Germany does not mean work-life balance in America or work-life balance in Africa. What health and safety policies is, there most of our customers agree that safety policies are important, because if safety policies are not regarded, then productivity might go down. But enforcing health, etc., there are different standards all over the world. So this is something where a discussion in depth started. What is the standard of a multinational company regarded all over the world? And this is something, especially companies that are not the big ones, but the smaller ones, did not start it yet. So if you then have a look at what's in there, I'm not talking about those disclosure requirements on the left-hand side, because I've talked already about policy, etc. But if you then have a look at the different disclosure requirements in terms of indicators, then there are a couple of indicators that again are not easy to match. If you have only the part diversity indicators, then you might think about gender. You have to talk about ethnical things. You have to talk about age. But again, here it's then by level, by top management, and by board members, etc. So it's a lot of different things you have to go through to meet those disclosure requirements, and to grab these information and bring it up to the headquarters to compile the reports. I think I put in these slides here, I flipped through these different standards here, just to give you a brief impression. The E1 is about the CO2 emission, the way to decarbonize. Energy efficiency, there, if you have used the GHG protocol and used the GHG disclosure, then you are fine with at least scope 1 and 2. Scope 3 will be a big challenge for most of the companies. Next thing is that you are defining the way how you want to come to a zero CO2 footprint. This is a long discussion within the company how to get it done. Then the next one would be the requirements on, again, material efficiency, energy efficiency, and how to reduce the consumption of those materials. Then you have the E3. This is policies for water and marine things. I already mentioned that the water you use, there you have to disclose on, is it fresh water or is it reused water? Are your plants in an area that is scarce of water, or how you bring the water back into a full cycle? This is basically what it's about, the E3 disclosure. Then you have biodiversity. By the way, one of those things that are not covered yet by the EU taxonomy, and we are all keen on knowing what they want to have here. But again, here it's really about where is your plant and where is your industry located, in what kind of area, and what is the impact on biodiversity and the ecosystems that you have there, and how you preserve the surrounding and with your actions. Next one is the value. The next one, the social. Bruce mentioned already, is to go along the chain with your suppliers. How do the suppliers treat their workers, and what are the working conditions along the supply chain? The S3 is about the affected communities. If you are within a community, what is the negative impact? We all know the things where it's noisy or it's dirty, etc. But it's also about, is there a lot of traffic in the community? Do you source within the community? Buy things within the community? How do you help and affect the community, and not only to take the resources away and bring them to the first level countries? Then you have the relation to your customers. the process, how you talk to the customers, and what does your products and your products do to the customers? How do they use it? Do they use it in a way that it might have negative impacts, etc.? This is something most of the people in the States know this from product guarantee laws, etc. That is quite obvious, something that people typically think about, but this standard focuses on think about how long how your product is used, and other products can be used very long and can be supported in a long way. So I think we can have had a brief overview about these different standards. What you see here is the main challenges that you have, from my point of from my experience, is that these requirements constantly change, and not all of those standards are already published. What I presented to you are the general terms, the general standards. There are more to come that are industry specific. And all these other regulations also change. So what you have to be prepared to is to cope with changing requirements. The second thing, which is the challenge, is that all these standards will change management structures. You have to define policies. You have to think about your policies. You have to change those management structures, especially if you want to achieve those targets and newly set targets. In the past, it would have been fine to say, okay, we have the target of X and Y, but now these targets are part of a law and part of something you have to disclose within your annual disclosure. And then it's not only something that is of marketing, but something that you have to be, that you are bound to. The third one is methodology and standardization. Most of those KPIs are not defined in the standards in a way that you just put them and use them. You have to define them in depth in your own organization. And you have to deal, in addition, with the complexity and quantity of information, because most of the companies are not have those information, but they are not used to bring these information to headquarters or to a central station. Most of these information formally are used very decentralized, and this means that all these different systems are not set up to bring these information to a central point of information to be reported to. And this means you have to enhance your reporting processes. You have to check that the data quality is ensured, and that you have the resources and capacities within your organization to deal with these new regulations. Once you have done this, you might disperse those people back into the functions, but you have to at first learn to cope with those different structures. And this means that you go from the definition via the source until the reporting and the integration into the management layer. This is the whole chain you have to work through. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but just these aspects that you just mentioned around the challenges of implementation, I think these show perfectly that the implementation approach should be an approach that is, a cross-silo approach within companies and organization. So in order to be successful and, be compliant to this new law, to this new regulation, you have to set up an implementation methodology that is, that is crossing the borders within organizations and, around divisions and around infrastructure and functions, right?
Right. And in essence, it's the same story that you have with the financials. Within the financials, you have a thorough definition that is spread across the whole organization, and each accountant has to comply with these definitions. And now you have the same thing with the social KPIs, with the ecological KPIs, things that used to be in the quality management or in the production management, but not have been defined to be used across the whole organization. Now, the aim is to use them centrally with a centrally defined definition and have it available in one source collected for central reporting. And if you have different targets, different objectives to be met by the management, you need to integrate them in your management systems, like your budgeting or strategy process, or in processes like your incentive models, etc. Otherwise, you will have always conflicts how to achieve those different KPIs and objectives.
And by the way, that's a great segue because we have a time check here. And
yeah,
next,
I know. I'm fine, and I hand
implementation.
over to Bruce. This is perfect for the implementation approach. This is now your part, Bruce.
Well, and no worries about that. But I wanted to make the point that I think what's really interesting that Heiko made the point of is this really is the Europeans looking at the whole stakeholder approach. In other words, breaking down, I'm not going to speak for Europe, but in the United States, we have a major issue with silos. So I'm trying here to share my screen. Hopefully with a little bit of luck, I will. And you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Great. So yeah, what's really interesting, and I'm going to take a kind of a Yankee perspective on this. I'm going to view this a little bit differently than Stefan presented it, because there's really what I'm going to be discussing a little bit here, pardon me, and I'm not on the right slide I'm now seeing, is the implementation process. And the implementation process, I'm going to race ahead to my section, excuse me, is really depending upon whether you view this as a business opportunity or if you view it as a obligation, a compliance issue. And that is going to really determine how you deal with this law. If you view it as a compliance issue, it's a major headache. It will require a lot of time. It will be annoying. If you view it as a business opportunity, which if you read the actual law itself, it's intended to be a business opportunity, you're going to actually view it as a marketing investment, as a business investment, and an opportunity to apply, in a sense, the principles of total quality management and stakeholder management to improve efficiency, performance, and experiences. So again, I'm going to really kind of give you the choice here. If you, on the one hand, if you're implementing the directive as a strategy to improve performance through alignment and trust, or if you're viewing it as a business opportunity, it's going to be very different. But those of us who view it as a business opportunity see it as an opportunity to improve risk management, to generate competitive advantages by demonstrating that my systematic approach to delivering my promises is an advantage over the companies that can't do this. It improves my business opportunities by reaching out to companies people that ordinarily wouldn't do business with me, by demonstrating that I'm going to provide a higher quality experience, increasing investor and stakeholder confidence, and most of all, taking advantage of the trust that comes with transparency. So my basic position here is that this is a business opportunity, and if you view it as one, it will actually be a productive operation. If you view it as a compliance issue, it will be a sunk cost. So the opportunity to use it as a strategy to enhance organizational experience and efficiency through greater alignment, that's the opportunity, according to a recent NASDAQ report that analyzed the law, that it's really like total quality management. It's an opportunity to streamline your activities. And so if you do that, if you view it as a business opportunity, you have to identify the people, but who you identify is different than if you view it as compliance, as I'll get to in a minute. You have to create, obviously, an appropriate methodology, as Stefan has begun to outline, and obtain data and the KPIs, and then, of course, the implementation of the reporting and the writing of the reporting. But people that view it as a business opportunity view it as an opportunity to enhance performance and stakeholder experiences, to improve marketing by backing up promises with actual statements that prove what we're doing. And if you're really viewing it as an opportunity, you're obviously going to take a different point of view than if you view it as a compliance issue. So what that means is, oh, wait a minute, I don't know how that slide came out. So anyway, I'm having a little bit of a technical issue here. Anyway, so if you are determined to do it on a compliance issue, legal team's going to head this thing. You're going to have your CFO and COO very involved, but this is going to be low key, no big fanfare in the organization. Hire your outside advisors if you need. View it as a compliance issue, be defensive, say as little as possible. And that's what a bunch of companies are going to do. And we have a lot of track record on this. Total quality management, ISO standards. They were never a law, but they became a law when major companies required their suppliers to follow them. So we know what happens when people are forced to do things. They often just check off the box and duck. And so that's what a bunch of companies are going to do. Those who view it as a business opportunity, they are going to have a different type of leader. They're going to have somebody who really has a system and growth orientation. It could even be the CEO, because a lot of it can be outsourced or, delegated, or it's a chief people officer who has true stakeholder authority. And of course, the CFO or COO or somebody has to be very involved, because as Heiko pointed out, this is a stakeholder alignment opportunity. And then your legal team is involved, but you notice I put them number 3. They're just there to make sure that you're not opening up any can of worms. So the difference between compliance and business opportunity is significant. And if you view it as a business opportunity, that ideal leader already knows your organization or is adept at understanding an organization's purpose, goals, objectives, and culture. This person has to have high emotional intelligence and patience and strong communication skills, because it is, in fact, fostering the alignment of people across your organization to work toward a common purpose, common goals, common objectives, with a continuous improvement process based on metrics that are transparent, with the goal of not just complying with the European law, gosh no, but to improving in performance, efficiencies, and experiences for everybody. That's, to me, the true opportunity of this. And if you already have a business operating system, it might be, some people know it as an EOS or a business operating system, this isn't going to be that difficult for you, because you already have a formal and strategic plan based on your purpose, your goals and objectives with metrics and reporting. So if you're already doing that, you're okay. But you still want to establish the clear goals and objectives with this project. This, like any other project, has goals and objectives. And to the extent possible, utilize the organization's current operating system. Don't create a new one. Don't create a new bureaucracy. Don't segregate it like DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is often done in this country. It has to be baked into the organization as total quality management. That's really what I think is the best analogy, not compliance, performance improvement. And then if you don't have a formal business opportunity business operating system, and that is a strategic and systematic way of managing your people across the organization, there are different methodologies. You can buy books on them, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is, just as Heiko said, it aligns everybody toward the same purpose, goals, objectives, metrics, and process. So this just becomes part of their job and not an additional bureaucracy. So if you don't have a formal business operating system, now is a darn good time to create one, because you're going to have to. You're going to have to, as I'm going to emphasize what Heiko pointed out, you're going to have your stakeholders aligned toward a common purpose, goals, and objectives. So training and management will have to be involved. You're going to have to, obviously, all your stakeholder leaders are going to have to understand this, whether you're in a compliance mode, less so. If you're in a business opportunity mode, more so. They need to understand stakeholder management principles, which, by the way, go back to the works of R. Edward Friedman from 1983, who's one of the leaders in stakeholder management. There's a whole stakeholder management society at the American Management Association, there's another strategic management group of professors. Bottom line is, this is established theory. So you have to make sure everybody understands stakeholder thinking, how different stakeholders affect different stakeholders. And then, of course, you want to have a strategic and systematic plan for carrying out this process with the help of an advisory firm when necessary. So again, creating the story this is a narrative. This is not just compliance. This is, if you want it to be a business opportunity, this is how we deliver our promises to all of our stakeholders in a strategic and systematic way. Here are purpose, goals, and objectives. Here are the metrics that we use. Here is how we continuously improve. And here is how we balance the risks that we create and the opportunities we create for our stakeholders with the risks and opportunities that they create for us. This concept of double materiality that has nothing to do with corporate responsibility. It's better business to run your business that way, and we know it from total quality management. So getting close to wrapping up, you want to use a collaborative process to clarify the authentic purpose, goals and objectives and values of the organization. This is an important exercise anyway. Clarify the issues that are material to the organization through a systematic process, and the law actually gives you a framework for that. It's very common sense. Specify the opportunities and risks created for stakeholders and how they are measured and addressed. Identify the risks and opportunities that, as I said, these people create and these issues create for you. The environment is a risk to us. Global warming, water level rises is a risk. So how are we dealing with it? It's just good common business practice. Then disclose the types of metrics or standards used for reporting and any changes in those metrics. The beauty of the law is that they let you use any metrics you want. You can use ISO standards, ISSB, you can use a combination as long as you explain it, articulate it, and if you change it, you have to explain why. And then it calls, what is your process for continuously improving? And then storytelling. This really is an issue. These corporate sustainability reports that are published in the United States, most of them are called corporate responsibility reports. They are obsolete, folks. They are really, most of them, I'm sorry, greenwashing. They're all about our voluntary activities, what we're doing to be nice. That's not what the European standards are interested in. That's not what total quality management is interested in. That's not what 50 years of work in stakeholder management is really looking at. We create positive change in society by running our businesses well and not imposing costs on them. That's what this law says. Don't impose hidden costs. And if you're going to, let us know what they are. So these corporate sustainability reports are much shorter, and the people that are on this call are among the only people who have ever done this. So while it does sound very complicated, it's because we are in the weeds, but it doesn't have to be as complicated as it looks, because it's a story. How are you adding value? How are you creating value for all your stakeholders? And how are you imposing risks on them? And how are you improving? So that story is a very important element of the whole thing. So again, the final step, evaluation. You want to have an ROI process measurement for this. It's like any other business venture. How are we going to turn this into an investment? How are we going to make our $50 million advertising budget more effective, our $30 million recruitment budget more effective by backing up all of our promises with an audited report that says how I'm going to keep my promises? That to me is a far more powerful way to create trust than to run a Super Bowl ad, which, by the way, costs far more. One Super Bowl ad, probably 10 times the cost of this entire venture, with, I think, a far greater ROI, if I may say. So anyway, you want to look at how is this effort going to help us achieve our key organizational goals and objectives? How are we going to get, what is the ROI of getting greater alignment across our stakeholders and breaking down silos? And how are we going to measure that? What is the percentage of organizational goals achieved versus previous years? What are the value of innovations that have been derived from this whole concept of reinforcing our stakeholder voice? That's a key part of the standard. How do you listen to your stakeholders? And then the simple measures. Are we going to see employee and customer referrals go up? Are we going to see higher engagement scores? I would look for an ROI in my investment in using this. And finally, in terms of the very first step that you have to do, and I missed that, I'm going to make you dizzy and skip back to it. This is, you don't have to read this slide, but this is the gap analysis. This is the first step. This only covers the S. Heiko's organization, Stefan's organizations are specialists in the E as well. Our organization in the US only specializes in the S. And so you look at your leadership, compliance, your costs, your diversity, equity, inclusion, occupational health and safety, organizational culture, productivity, recruitment mobility, employee bench strength, skills and capabilities, workforce availability, customer engagement, supply chain and distribution partner engagement, community engagement. This gap analysis is a combination of ISO 30414 human capital reporting, And two of the gentlemen on this call are experts in that. And then also ISO 10018 for people engagement strategies. So that gap analysis can really help you determine how much work you have to do. And then just again, I now am wrapping up. In terms of time, let me tell you, this is going to be the boondoggle of all times unless companies really get sensible about it, because most of the management consulting companies themselves have silos. So they don't even know how to deal across silos. They have ESG departments that don't talk to their customer service departments. So you need an organization or support that understands stakeholder management and that understands this law so that you're not paying them to train them. Okay, that's the cost of business you don't want to have to pay for. So the prep time isn't as big as you think. It's a strategic planning meeting. And again, it can differ, but based on our actual experience, and by the way, Heiko's company and Stefan's company has done very big companies. My company has done an SME, a small, medium-sized enterprise. So a management strategic plan, development, reporting. This is your business plan. If you're doing it as a compliance issue, it's a sunk cost. If you're doing it as a business opportunity, it's an investment. And you're looking at about 250 hours of internal blended time. A lot of this is management time to create your annual business plan and your metrics. So again, if you're doing it as part of your system, it isn't going to be as bad. The IT, that depends upon the gap analysis. That depends totally, but you're going to have to create a centralized reporting platform, which will be a dashboard for every one of your managers to help them run their business better. So again, it's an investment, if you will. So, and then obviously moving on, communications, depending on the size of the company, it's going to be more. But again, this is a real big opportunity to get ripped off. I've written one of these reports myself personally, and 120 blended hours for a smaller company and 360 hours, again, debatable. But again, it's not going to be what some companies are going to try to sell you. Legal, yes. For a smaller company, though, not that big a deal. For a bigger company, a bigger deal. But it is not a full-time job because the law is really not that complex. I read it myself in an afternoon, the whole thing. So, we're looking, for a smaller company. Again, if you're already running your business this way, this is not an extra cost. It is what you do. If you are running your company in an ad hoc, reactive basis without a business operating system, it's going to cost you a lot more. But we don't think even a big company should be even up at the $1 million level in the first year. And again, if they're baking it into their operating systems, it'll be less. And if in the future years, it will be less for that reason as well. And in fact, we think that you can turn this into into a profit center when you use metrics to measure how you're using this corporate sustainability report to build trust with all of your stakeholders, to foster alignment across the organization, to deliver your marketing promises, and to have a systematic approach to voice so that you're always identifying opportunities and risks, and you have a systematic way of dealing with them. So with that, I am going to stop the share and turn this over to Zahid Mubarak, who, if you don't know him already, he is truly one of the world's innovators and leaders in human capital management reporting and training. And I believe, Zahid, you have trained more people in ISO 30414 than anybody by a magnitude of about 10-fold. So my congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And also I'm grateful to all the panel members for, I think this is a very important dialogue. And thanks for taking this initiative. So a lot has been said with regards to the value addition. And since this ESRS, which is a very comprehensive framework, and from an S standpoint, for which we are mainly focusing, it has got 4 different threads, where your organization need to be concerned about some of the aspects about the own workforce, the workforce and the workers in the value chain. That includes your part-timers or the outsourced employees, and the gig workers, consultants, your affected communities, and also the impact of your products and services on the consumers and the end users. So it's a very specific approach, and we have to make sure that we have the right tools to address all these areas. Now, the 2 things that emerged from the previous conversation, one that was highlighted by Stefan, that there is a need for the KPIs And in the the area like finance, the KPIs are explicitly defined, but when it's come to particularly the social aspects, there's more of a I think so approach. So that is where we have to be careful that if we can use something that is already there, where there's a consensus, and so that we don't have to reinvent something. So I would be talking about the how you can have a better disclosure about the own workforce by using some of the already developed framework, which is called the ISO 30414. There's I think, denial of the fact that now the traditional system of the disclosure, the previous one purely based on the financial statement, like the earning per share, was considered to be one of the key factors, but that's now the obsolete. And this has been proven with the help of different researchers. There are numerous articles which truly indicate there's a positive correlation between using the data for managing the human capital. But the story of disclosure for a human capital is not new. I think there are no doubt ESRS is a very, I would call, assertive regulation, but there are already standards worldwide which reinforce the importance of the different functions of the human capital and how they need to be disclosed. But there are challenges, there are issues, and those issues are already in the spotlight. For example, in 2021, there has been a survey on the, how the investors, they look at the S aspects, and the finding of the survey was that they see it just like a tick box, looking at the basic rudimentary sort of numbers. So whether those numbers really help the people in making a better decision or not, that's basically a question. So far, based on my own experiences, and I had in not only in my own country, but experience of working with a different national standards body, like American national standards, British standards, France standards, German standards, Italy standards, and a couple of others, and also acting as a consultant or speakers in different countries, I could figure out there are so many ways of looking at the HR data. And in most cases, this is poorly organized. It's not authentic that somebody can rely upon it. So the concept of the HR management and how this is being practiced are two different things. HR measurement model was invented in 1969 by a gentleman called Jack Fizzens. And he exactly looked at the performance of the HR from a stakeholder perspective. How stakeholder perspective, for example, if you're dealing with the development of the people, you're one of the stakeholders, the HR itself, which primarily concerned about the volume of the people that are being trained, or the cost, or the overall the number of the training hours. But then you have the line managers. They're the key stakeholders who are interested whether people are really being developed. You have a resource allocation at the board level. The CFO, the CEO, they are interested in the ROI, the cost management, profitability. So do we really have the right kind of measure to address their concern? And if we don't do that, Bruce has already mentioned that our narrative or the statement that we publish at the end of the year, that's more of a lip service where we say people are most valuable assets, when in the true form is not being done. So the human capital disclosure, I think by now, is a very strong mechanism to realize you can say the implications, or realize the truth of those sentiments where we consider human capital, but do not have the mechanism to demonstrate. ISO needs no introduction. It's a global organization of 168 countries. And they basically, the countries get together to make different standards. Standards is the definition of the standard. It's basically a document that provides a requirement, specification, guideline, or the characteristics to make sure that there's a consistency. Now, the key takeaway in this process is the consistency, because if you do not have an objective framework to implement something, its integrity and it becomes questionable. So consistency is the key item, and the standards enjoy the consistency based on the certain characteristics that they are developed with a lot of due diligence and agreed by the vast majority or through a consensus-based process. And the people develop harmony, because there are, for example, 168 countries, so you cannot have 168 countries, right? You have to have a compatible way of, addressing the concerns of all the stakeholders. So in that context, standard is a harmonized document. They don't just look at the day-to-day affairs. You can look at take a strategic perspective, the solid documentation, and they also address the aspect of the materiality, where you can understand, you can find out what is important or what is more important for the organization, and that may not be more equal important for another organization. So there are different, I think, researches around the world, the standard, the impact, the productivity. This is one of the research by the BSI, where this has been proved that it has a significant impact, not only on the productivity, but even the small and the medium organization, if they use the standard, they are basically more better candidate for the exports. So the ISO basically, which started developing the standards, and they formed a committee in 2011. I was fortunately one of those founding members. There were only 11 countries at that point of time. By now, the representation of countries in the ISO is 38 participating members and 27 observers. The committee has been able to develop 30 different standards out of them, and 5 are in progress. And I already said the huge benefit that you get. There's a harmony, transparency, a smooth flow of talent. You can do the things on a larger scale, and employee morale is better. It boosts the economy, it boosts the GDP, and it also improves the credibility of their profession because there's a consistent way of doing things. So one of the key standards where we have the expertise out of all the standards, 31 those have been published, is ISO 30414, which is actively being used for our clients by myself. Fortunately, I have been able to develop more than 500 people all over the world, and this is the highest head count on the certifying the people on the standards. Heike company had the experience of dealing with the organization certification, I think, more than anyone else. So in this regard, this is a very good framework where you're able to look at the 11 important areas of the human capital management, including the compliance, the cost, diversity, leadership, culture, health, safety, productivity, recruitment, skills, succession planning, workforce availability, in a very structured way. As I told you, there's no dearth of the data, but there's a dearth of the quality data, because the way you see a difference between an accounting and finance, accounting is more transaction-based, ledgers, accounting, day-to-day data, but finance gives you the future picture. So you can say that accounting is more of a rear view mirror, and your finance is a windshield. So in a similar way, the kind of data that you require according to this standard, there are 58 key metrics, and those are split into at least 11 areas, and they're further recommended to be used by small and medium organization and the large organization, but there's no restriction. It's the choice of the organization. Whatever they feel comfortable, they can use. As far as the ESR is concerned, it already has got very segmented and explicit approach. So if we see the ISO 30414 and the ESRS, I think both they complement. Some of the areas where there's a content complete overlap, and some of the areas they address the things in their unique way. The ISO 30414, as I said, it's a very good tool to ensure the compliance. Whatever policies and the procedure that you have in your organization, you can make it happen and see it in the form of a proper disclosure. It positions. Say again, Heike, you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but to go back to your previous slide. So this overlap to the S1 standards is a pretty good example of what Stefan mentioned earlier, because some of the aspects of the ESRS standards are not specified too precisely yet. So what companies and organizations really can do is use ISO guidelines like ISO 30414, for example, to have a precise framework in order to implement aspects of the ESRS standards.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the addition. So as I said, people are most valuable asset, but can you really position them in a way that you, for example, one of the latest research finding by an valuation company in the United States, Tom Ocean, they say that more than 90% of value creation come to the intangibles. So are you really able to see the linkages between the organization talent and how does it really contribute to the organization bottom line through a structured mechanism. So it's by using this standard, you are in a good position to do that. So promoting the transparency, managing the risk, the productivity, competitive advantage, and most importantly, you highlighted the aspect of the silos, the way the organization, even within the organization, the HR operates may sometimes standalone departments. So it provides you good opportunity where the HR, finance, IT, health and safety, and all other key elements that come together and they manage the human capital. So it's not the HR department standards, the human capital management standard. And there are, I think, going forward, there are more companies that will be getting certified on this. So I have few of them on my list, but not all of them. So Deutsche Bank, for example, the DWS Asset Management, Allianz, one of the subsidiary of the Toyota in Japan, two other companies in Japan like Modis and the LMG Group. At least two of them were certified with our collaboration because we have partnership in Japan. I think for the rest of the company, the greater share goes to HEICO. And then one company, the Union, it's called the Union Bank of India. What at the end of the day, I mean, the important thing is that we need to see that we should not be reinventing the wheel, or we should be able to use some of the tools for which there's already a consensus. And the most important thing, which is highlighted by the Bruce, to see the things from not compliance perspective, but how does it really add value and how it can drive the sustainability of the organizations, the individuals, the industry, country, and the complete world, I would say. With this, I conclude, and thank you so much for, that's all from my side. If there's any question or comment, I'm happy to take my share.
Well, thank you very much, Zahid. That was terrific. And thank you so much, Stefan Grunwald and Eiko Moder for participating in this program, which was right on time. So to summarize, what we've tried to accomplish here is to present really what is, in a sense, total quality management for people management. The Europeans view this as the anti-greenwashing law. That's their term, anti-greenwashing law, and to level the playing field, that's their term, so that stakeholders, investors, employees, customers, communities can get a clear sense of what an organization, what its purposes, goals, objectives, how it's measuring its performance, how it's improving it, and the risks that it is imposing on us, and what they're doing to mitigate them. And in turn, the risks that we stakeholders, customers, employees, supply chain partners, and the environment impose on them. So again, as Zahid said, if we view this as a business opportunity, I wouldn't even put it in as a cost. It's a marketing, you could run a small ad campaign for what this is going to cost. And what this is going to do is get your entire organization aligned toward common purpose, goals, and objectives, and to build trust with all of your stakeholders by being transparent about how you keep your promises. That, to me, is a business opportunity. And for those of you who view it as a compliance issue, we'll be delighted to help you. No problem. There are many people that will be delighted to help you, but it's going to be a sunk cost with no ROI. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us today. And good luck, folks, on your ventures. And this deck is available to anybody who reaches out. We'll put on the EEA YouTube show where to get the copy of the deck, and we'll be happy to share it with you. And thanks again.
Bye.